All right. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us today to listen in on our Building Native Agriculture series. Today, we will be speaking about how tribal foods tie into feeding programs. Chris, I'll go ahead and let you take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us. It's hard to believe it's our last webinar of 2021, and I appreciate each and every one of you that have joined in and watched us each month since we started this Third Thursday series. And again, I want to start out, please keep all of our tribe members and communities in your hearts and prayers, the ones that have had losses since our last webinar. Even, if you think about the snowstorms in Hawaii and on the West Coast, the tornadoes in the Midwest, the drought, a lot of people in need, a lot of families in need. And if there's tribes that you know of that have a need right now, please share that with us. Or if you work with a tribe or a food group that has surplus products that you're looking to hand out, please share that with us as well. Maybe we can connect groups together that can help each other and help the families. So again, we appreciate everyone joining us today, and we're ready to get started. Next slide, please. Our agenda for today, we're going to recap our previous webinars. We're going to review the benefits of using our tribal foods inside of our tribal enterprises and entities, our planning to integrate tribal foods, the infrastructure, labor. We'll share our funding opportunities that we know of that have came out recently, and we'll leave a few minutes for questions. Next slide. Hopefully you've been with us through our series here, but for those of you that have not been able to see all of our webinars that we've done, we started out with business planning, grant writing, and then on to standing up infrastructure. We had a good webinar on labor and training opportunities. We had a good guest that helped us understand HACCP plans and food safety. And then last month, we talked about retail and vertical integration with your tribal products. Next slide. When you're thinking about using your tribal foods and where to use them, how to use them, and what to grow, a lot of people do this for various reasons. We wanted to share some of the reasons that we have seen and maybe help you kind of broaden the spectrum a little bit and help you understand some of the other benefits that you can see and your tribe can benefit from. The health benefits are obvious: increased food security, less concern about the chemical, hormones, or contamination. If you're growing those products yourself, you're able to control all those things. So we've seen folks that do all natural, organic. You can control what soils used, water, any kind of fertilizers that might be used or none. You're able to control the quality and nutrition of the food products by supplying to your own entities and tribe members. You can focus on food products that address your food concerns or health concerns inside your tribe. Some of your community members may fall through the gaps of food assistance programs. We see this everywhere. They're what we sometimes term as the working poor. These are folks that have jobs that can be husband and wife teams, that can be single parents, but they make just enough money to not be eligible for any kind of food assistance at all. And there's so many of those folks that are in need. And a lot of those folks we have found through food sovereignty surveys that they're too afraid to even ask for help at times. So these feeding programs on tribal lands are extremely important to make sure that everyone that needs food can get it, and they're not having to be worried about where their next meal is coming from. There's a lot of cultural benefits. These help strengthen your community knowledge about traditional foods. When you're growing these foods on your own lands, you can host training seminars, you can host outreach programs and invite the tribe members, invite the kids, invite all the schools. You can integrate these feeding programs into your educational programs and help strengthen this knowledge and bring back traditional foods to your lands. You can intentionally select and serve foods that follow traditional food pathways from seed to table. A lot of this food education is lost from generation to generation. But when we start these feeding programs, we're seeing the elders come out and participate in these feed programs and in the education programs to make sure that the lessons are taught to the kids and to the youth on seed saving and how valuable it is to have your cultural seeds and how important these different tribal foods are to the nutrition of your families. So we're seeing a lot of benefits in these feeding programs. Next slide. And now to the economic benefits. This is a lot of times what your councils might be focused on, your business managers. If you're able to grow the products yourself, you're able to keep the money inside your own operation. You're able to control the supply of the products. No one knows better when these products are going to be needed than the people inside your community. When a pandemic comes along, like COVID, you're able to control what products are planted or what animals are harvested. You're able to control your own supply chains. You're not worried about if a product gets stuck on a boat out in the ocean somewhere. It's going to be in your warehouse or in your cooler or in your freezer and ready to be distributed whenever it's needed. You're able to build your future capacity in many, many different ways. This can be from storage. This can be from growing environments, whether you have greenhouses, whether you're doing this in open land. You can control your gardens, your meat production. You can control it all if you've got the food operations in your own lands and in your own control. You're going to internally control your own cold storage and inventory. So this means you can stockpile even. You can stockpile products when the markets allow you to either purchase or grow. You're able to take donations from groups when they have surpluses. And what we've seen in the pandemic, when there's been disruptions in supply chains or when restaurants close, that created a large surplus of product that would have normally went to a restaurant. We saw semi-loads of food products that got distributed out to tribes, and tribes were restricted on what they could take based off of storage capacity. If they didn't have warehousing or cold storage or coolers available, they weren't able to take it. And in some cases, they had neighboring tribes that were able to take it for them and hold it or even deliver it. But tribes need to have the ability to control their food security and manage their own inventory. You need to be able to transport these products. So having a truck available, a reefer truck or a box truck that you can keep food safe and secure in. Dry goods, you need a nice warehouse facility that you can store them and know, obviously it needs to be rodent free, needs to be climate controlled. You need to be able to feel secure that you have somebody managing that properly so that when the need arises, you can get it distributed where it needs to go and when it needs to get there. Episode 6, we talked pretty in depth about using tribal products in retail and vertical integration. There's a lot of information in that webinar. And if you didn't get to see them, you can always go to Native American Ag Fund's website, and there's links on there about building native agriculture and the Third Thursday series that we've been doing. So all those webinars are available on NAF's website. Next slide. The first thing you need to do is determine your needs and set goals. And a lot of this can be done through your food sovereignty assessments. We try to continually encourage communities, organizations, tribes to do the food sovereignty assessment first. If you need help figuring out this assessment and surveys, there's links on some of our previous webinars, or you can simply call us or email us and we'll get you some examples. But do the food sovereignty survey, determine your needs, figure out what your community members are wanting, Figure out what your current assets, resources, and issues are in your community. And your issues can be financially related, they can be health related, they can be related to anything that you put in your survey. You want to try to customize your survey to identify the issues in your community so that you can obviously help fix those issues or provide a solution to those issues. Once you get that, you can evaluate the cost benefit of each one of the things that you're looking at doing. You want to assess a project's strengths and weaknesses to maximize your benefits. You want to do the most things that you can do as economic as possible. There are a lot of things that you're going to find when you do your food sovereignty assessments you can do through education and outreach that won't cost you or the tribe hardly anything. There will be other larger projects that you can categorize and hopefully go find grants for, or go back to your tribal councils and present a project to be funded through general funds possibly. But there are a lot of grant projects, grant funding available to fund these type of projects right now. It's a great time to identify your projects, identify your goals, and have a project with what we call shovel ready or construction ready. Have these projects planned, budgeted, so that when grants come out, you have a group of projects ready to go into those grants. So don't wait until a grant comes out, because a lot of times these grants are only open for a short period of time, and you won't leave yourself enough time to put the entire project together or to do your surveys, do your assessments, to do your evaluations. You need to do all this ahead of time. Do it before your grants come out. Strategic plans. You want to be able to map out the steps needed to reach your food sovereignty goals. We've talked about this a lot in our webinars, but again, if you'll plan this out early, sometimes you do it by committee. You obviously have to involve your tribal business council or business committee, but you want to talk to the people that are in touch with your tribe members. And that can be through Title VI programs. It can be through daycare programs, social service programs. There's a lot of different people that you need to involve to get the raw data that you need to build strong programs. Next slide. Sample questions on the food sovereignty assessments. On average, how many cups of fruit and vegetables do you eat each day? Which of the following describes the type of vegetables you eat most often? Sometimes it's canned, dried, fresh, frozen. How familiar do you consider yourself to be with traditional foods? Would you prefer to eat more traditional foods? Do you have any food allergies or sensitivities? These are some of the questions that we highly recommend that you ask. There's also questions you can put on there in regards to hunger. How many meals do you cook at home each week? How far is it to your closest grocery store? These are all sample questions that are very important to know. If you have community members that are driving 30 miles to a grocery store, they're going to have trouble getting fresh foods and keeping fresh foods. But please review our episode number 1 on building native agriculture, strategic planning, and feasibility. There's more information. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have a little something I can add to this too.
Okay.
So I think, these are a good starting point. The First Nations Development Institute has a great tool that has tons of questions on there that you can think through to help develop your survey, and nobody knows your area and your geographic area and your community better than you do. But each of these questions leads to more questions. So for example, if you're asking how many cups of fruits and vegetables they eat each day, the surveys that I've done, people weren't eating half of what they actually should be. So that's the question for us of why aren't they eating enough? Is it financial related? Is it geography? Is it even available to them? One community, we found out that there's just not tribal meats for sale. Like, they wanted to eat different types of meats and they weren't because they didn't have any available to them. If you're asking them what types of vegetables they eat most often and they're saying canned, Is that because they're driving 100 miles to the grocery store and just having to bring back a month's worth at a time? Or, maybe they're eating a bunch of fresh, maybe they're already really into gardening. Or if they're not eating fresh, can you start a garden to help them out with that? Can we make community plots? There's these all kind of lead to different projects. A lot of people that I found, asking them how familiar they are with traditional foods, most of them weren't. Most of the general community was not familiar with traditional foods. But then we had a question of if they wanted to learn more about it, and they said yes. And we turned around and used that in grant applications to say, our community is interested in this. Can we get some money to start up a workshop program? Or can we get some money to make educational materials about this? And so in food allergies and sensitivities, we use that a lot in Title VI programs or daycares. If we're going to be serving tribal foods in these facilities, do they have a gluten allergy? Is that going to be an issue? Or do they have some kind of milk allergy or lactose or something like that? We don't want to go through all the efforts in our agriculture programs to get foods or trade for other tribal foods and have people not be able to eat it because they have these allergies that we didn't think to ask about. So those are some examples of how those tie off into different types of projects, ideas, or how they ask different follow-up questions. And you can kind of anticipate what people may answer for your community, but it really helps to get that hard data so you actually know. And I've yet to see a survey, and the ones I've done, that didn't have at least a few questions that really surprised me, or ask even open-ended questions and just see what people say. And you really do learn a lot, even if you think you know your community really well. It's always interesting to see what people will say anonymously. I'm going to the next slide now.
Those are all good points, Shelby, and I can tell you one of the biggest one that will really open your eyes is the food gaps. And there's a lot of people that qualify for food assistance in the WIC programs and the food distribution programs on Indian reservations. A lot of people qualify for that, and there's a lot of people that are food secure. But there's a tremendous amount of our community members that fall in between. They're not food secure and they don't qualify for food programs. So think about the people in your community. It can be your neighbors, it can be your kids, it can be your coworkers, but there are tons of people, and it's thousands in every community, that fall into that food gap. So we have to build programs that fit those folks getting assistance that they need when they need it. And they can't be scared to ask for help. You want to make it public, you want to make it open, inviting. They can't ever feel like they're being segregated or left out or anything. So we've got to be open to everybody. Another thing we're seeing a big growth in is tribal trade. There's a lot of tribes that are growing products. Food sovereignty movements have been growing tremendously in the last year, but last several years for a lot of tribes. So tribes that grow a lot of meat or vegetables are looking to trade with tribes that grow fruit or fish. So if you're a tribe that has, again, surplus of a product or another, but you're not getting other things that you would like, reach out to us and let's see if we can connect you with a tribe that's growing or producing something that you have a need for. We want to keep connecting tribes and keep increasing the tribal trade as more producers come online and more tribes continue growing in food production. Next slide. Where to tie in tribal foods. We've probably talked about most of these already, but Title VI is a big one. Our elder programs, you can control the quality of the meals. I know when we first started one in Northeast Oklahoma, we were seeing the quality of the meats tremendously better than what the Title VI was getting through their purchasing program. They were also able to free up funds that they were using to buy some of these lesser quality foods and spend money on other programs for their elders. The child care centers We provided some different snacks. You can supplement or replace outside meat and produce orders. You can actually promote the school gardens, and you can grow the traditional foods and start teaching that with your young children. You can also provide seeds to those kids, take those home and encourage them to plant those with their parents. I know there's been cases also where we were able to actually send little pots home with kids with a seedling already started in a plant. And it was very encouraging to see how far they went with that, whether they grew them in their house or planted them in a garden. And it was very engaging for the families to do that. The farmers markets and food hubs, you're increasing your food security by maintaining a steady supply of tribal foods. If you have the greenhouses that you're able to grow in, you're able to grow products year round. These things are able to tie into the farmers markets and food hubs where you can sell or trade your products. You're bringing your community together at the farmers markets. We're seeing a tremendous response in communities that are holding farmers markets. There's a tribe that I work with currently. They're baking breads and pies and offering those at their markets with products that they're growing themselves. It's pretty phenomenal. And when you can bring in hundreds of tribe members for a farmer's market and let them all work together and enjoy the products that are being grown on the tribal lands, it's pretty amazing to see. And I think our ultimate goal is the food distribution program on Indian reservations. There's no reason why the food that goes into the FDIPR programs isn't being raised by tribes. We need to get to a point where we're producing enough food to feed our people. It starts with a community and then it grows into a region. And hopefully we get to a point very soon that we're supplying all the foods that go into these programs. So, next slide. The infrastructure. The infrastructure builds the capacity you need to produce enough food to supply feeding programs. We've touched on this. Some tribes are choosing to start with one thing. Some are going all in and starting with all kinds of things, which is great. But some of these things are meat processing plants, greenhouses, high tunnels, and I'll add aquaponics to that. Aquaponics, incorporating the plants and the fish to go together. The storage facilities, warehouses, dry storage, freezers, cold storage. There's a lot of things that you can do to increase your food security inside your tribe. But again, the ultimate goal, feeding your region and feeding the FDIPR programs where we don't have any of these communities that doesn't know where their food's coming from. Episode 3 was specifically on standing up infrastructure. You can refer back to very specific data in that episode. But if you need any assistance or if you just want to talk through any one of these type of projects, please reach out and let us know. We've got a lot of information that we can share with you. Next slide. Labor opportunities. Again, we've had a specific webinar on labor and training. Producing tribal foods is not easy. Meat processing is one of the hardest jobs out there. Gardening, if any of you have your own garden, you know how hard it is to work the soil and pull the weeds and harvest and can. But these are all things that need to be taught and passed on. The members of your communities and our communities need to be able to know how to do these things. We need to be able to take care of ourselves and feed ourselves. Some of the labor opportunities that we've used and been very successful for is the AmeriCorps VISTA program. It's directed toward ending or reducing the impacts of poverty. Matter of fact, Shelby was part of that program and she came to a tribe in Northeast Oklahoma. Timeline on the VISTA, I guess, is now 3 to 5 months. Used to be a year, didn't it, Shelby?
Yeah, so that's the timeline that it would take for a tribe to reach out to VISTA and get on their list to receive a volunteer. So once the volunteer is there, they'll be there for a year. But
Gotcha.
you need to, if you want that person to come to you, you need to start about 3 to 5 months before you want them to start. So that give yourself enough time to get through that application process.
That's a good point. Shelby, you want to explain the Food Corps program as well? I'm not as in
Food
tune with
Corps
that one.
is similar. It's also a volunteer program, a federal program, but their mission is specifically to connect kids to healthy foods in schools. So if you are a school-based program, or if you work closely with a school or have a tribal school, this could work really well for you. If you're not in a school, then look more towards the VISTA program. And it's only in select states, so it is a little more limited, and you will have to pay $7,500 per service member. But again, you're getting them for a longer period of time. With the AmeriCorps, you may have to pay to have that employee there as well, but they are being paid by the federal government. However, you may have to have some kind of match involved, and it's been changing pretty recently. I did it 3 years ago, and I believe it's changed somewhat about every year since then. And so we linked both of those programs there. So just you can get on there and check to see what it is right now. We didn't want to put too specific information in here, just in case somebody was reviewing this webinar a year from now. We wanted it to stay up to date, but just follow those links in this whenever these slides get emailed out, and you can get on their website and start that process or learn more about it for yourself on there. And we kind of went into more detail on it as well in episode 4 about labor and training. We did the whole webinar all about different labor opportunities.
All good points. Thank you, Shelby. Another one is interns. I always try to promote internships, especially within your tribal students. If you can reach out and make it aware that you have internships for your tribal students to come back to, no matter where they're going to school at. It can be college students, or maybe it's high school, depending on what your age limits are that you set. Typically, we see this as college type interns that maybe even have a discipline of study in, maybe it's engineering or natural resources, or it could be food sovereignty, food security. It could be native studies. It's so broad that agriculture ties to so many different subjects, and it's important. And not only to tie your students back to your tribe, but it could be traditional foods. It could be in the farmers markets or greenhouses or meat processing. You're teaching them some valuable skills, and it usually doesn't cost that much money. They're usually not working a lot of hours. You want to pay them enough, obviously, that they can get by and they can sustain themselves while they're working with you. But it's usually short periods of time. It can be a summer, it can be a semester. It can work out in a lot of ways. In some cases, if they're local, it might just be after school or something. So it's usually not a lot of dollars, but the benefits you can see from having those interns is really amazing. You get the youth, you get the energy, and they have the drive to really make things happen typically. So it's a great place to start there with interns.
And with interns, you can also get grant money for that. I've had great success getting grant funding for internship programs to help cover their labor for that year that they were on. And one of the things that we did with one of the tribes I worked with that I liked pretty well was they already had the infrastructure up, and they were just looking for more hands to help out. And so the interns rotated. I mean, they were working in the gardens maybe in the morning, then they were going over to Title VI to help with food distribution in the afternoon, or they were spending a week or two at the meat processing plant learning how to label different things and learning how that process works. And then they were going out and helping with the cattle and the bison at the feeding facility and working with them. So they were rotating, and they were seeing all these different areas. Some of them even spent time with the environmental department, learning about the different soil sciences and doing water samples out in the fields and making sure that there weren't any unintended consequences of the processing plant, making sure that everything was working the way it was supposed to. And so there's all kinds of different things. And if you already have that infrastructure in place, I do highly recommend just rotating those interns through and giving them through all your different feeding facilities and letting them see and experience how that can work through all of them.
Great point. And nice that you brought up the grants, but as you're looking at your next NAF grant, even think of that as a possible funding mechanism for your internships to go along with your other farming and ranching programs. So, next slide. Then that brings us to funding opportunities. These webinars go faster than we think sometimes, but we like to cover a lot of ground. We have a community food project competitive grant program that closes on 12/20. You have the USDA Farm to School grant, which Shelby's been successful on numerous times, due January 10th, and the Rural Business Development Grant, which closes on February 28th. A lot of good grants come out. They come out every week. And matter of fact, this week I've seen several come out. They came out after this presentation was prepared, but check grants.gov regularly. And I recommend at least weekly. If you're looking for funding for any type of project, get on the email blasts that the USDA sends out. Check with First Nations, make sure you're on their email blasts, and make sure you're checking on NAF's emails, as well as the Indian Ag Council. They send out good newsletters and try to recap funding opportunities very regularly. So I know it adds extra emails to your inbox, but they can be very worthwhile. Anything to add on this?
Yeah, this community foods project is one of the ones that I think Chris was talking about earlier, where I believe it's up to 400,000. It can be up to 3 years. And it has such a short opening that's when if you have a strategic plan in place, or if you have that food sovereignty assessment already done, you can get a lot of bang for your work with this one grant and have secure funding for 3 years. But if you're just starting from scratch and you haven't put that foundation in place to get these projects and have them prioritized and lined up, then that's going to be really hard to get done in that timeline. The USDA Farm to School it's federal also, but it's not a too difficult grant, and you can get it done in a shorter amount of time. And that's a great way. We wrote gardens into different projects. You can get different snack foods in. You can one of the tribes I worked with, we really wanted to focus on, they have a meat processing plant already. They already have daycares in place. And we just wanted to establish that connection between the two and make sure we are getting that tribal foods to the learning centers, and they just haven't had time to sit down and get that partnership worked out because they've both been so busy in their respective businesses that, so you got this grant, now you can sit down together and focus completely on that. So there's a lot of different ways that can go, and they have a lot of different directions. That one is due pretty soon. And I don't know a whole lot. I haven't myself done the Rural Business Development Grant, but I know that it's a big one that a lot of other people are working on that has a lot of opportunities as well.
Yeah, and please think about that community food projects grant. I mean, if you imagine $400,000 grant that you can use to feed your community, goes a long way. So you can implement a project, you can buy food, do distribution programs. A lot of wonderful things can happen with that money. Next slide. Financial resources. There are several series that Native American Ag Fund is putting on, business planning, sources of farm financial information. Please check NAF's website for, they just have there's a wealth of information on there, from studies, articles, webinar series that are being done, and they're all posted and updated on their website now. NAF has went through their website and updated it this year. It's a lot of great information on there, and sometimes they'll even redirect you to another site. But please check that regularly. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll try to direct you in the right direction, or try to help get you the assistance you're looking for. Next slide. Upcoming webinars, agriculture policy. We will probably have some good guest speakers coming with us on that one. February 17th, we have food distribution, storage, and logistics. In March, we have regional food models and opportunities. April, lessons learned and best practices. In May, our overview and action steps for building our future. Again, if anyone has any suggestions, any subjects that we haven't hit so far that you'd like to see hit, please email us and reach out and let us know. Again, any general questions, we'll be glad to help everybody. Are there any questions that we need to address or anyone has today?
It doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat box, but I would like to say as well, we are recording this webinar series and we will be emailing this out to you guys after. We also constantly upload this to our YouTube and to our website. So if you guys ever want to look back at this webinar or any of our webinar series, you can go back to that through that as well.
That sounds great. And there's our contact information. You've got Shelby and I, our email and our cell number. So please feel free to reach out anytime. And again, if we don't know the answer, we'll definitely try to connect you with somebody that does. And if there's not any more questions, we appreciate everyone joining us today and look forward to seeing you the next time.
I just want to add, I did recently get a new phone number. So if you have my phone number saved for some reason, or if you contacted me before, this is the first webinar that has my new phone number on it. So if you don't save it from any of the old webinars, so everybody's up to date.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.